Time's River. Prologue. Mom? The boy pushed the door open a crack. Inside, though the Saturday morning sun had climbed high into a clear, unblemished sky, the bedroom was dim. The heavy blinds had been drawn, and the fragments of light which slipped past their guard played spotlight to dancing dust motes in a slanting, pencil-thin column that terminated on the bed. The boy smelled the mixed aromas of hairspray and cologne, powder and leather. His father was away at work, and as his eyes adjusted, the lad could see his mother lying on the far side of the bed. She was sitting up, propped on pillows, surrounded by the wreckage of a dozen Kleenex tissues. In spite of the warmth in the room, she lay in a thick green bathrobe with her face in her hands. "Are you okay, Mom?" the boy asked. "I'm just sad right now," she told him. "It's nothing for you to worry about." Her voice sounded clogged and nasal, as to be expected from someone who has been crying. In truth, she had been positively wailing not long before, but her peremptory dismissal of his concern indicated she hadn't really been aware she had been doing so. Looking into his worried green eyes, though, she could see that this simple assurance wouldn't be sufficient to dissuade him. "Why? What's wrong?" he insisted. She patted her husband's empty side of the bed. The boy climbed up and sat on the edge of the bed. It's Annette Funicello," she sighed. "The Mouseketeer?" he queried. "They say—" She paused, thinking that this wasn't the sort of thing that she should tell him, that it was too adult. But he had always been able to grasp feelings in ways that even many adults she had known could not. And life, after all, was hard sometimes, and better to see things sooner rather than later. "They say she killed herself. When I was a little girl, I always wanted to be like her. She was the pretty one, she was the popular one, and now she's gone, and nobody knows why." The boy lifted her hand from her side and clasped it in his much smaller ones. He looked at her solemnly and said, "Don't be sad anymore, Mom. You are the most beautiful girl in the whole world. Maybe Annette got sad too. Maybe there was something she was trying to be, and it made her so sad she didn't know what to do. And I don't want you to die. Don't be sad anymore, okay?" She pulled him awkwardly to herself and hugged him. That was just the sort of thing she should have expected. "Don't worry, I'm not going to die. I'm just sad, but I'll be fine. Go on outside and play now." He looked at her doubtfully from under beetling brows. He slid off the edge of the bed and went to the door. Looking back, he said, "I wish there was something I could do to fix it for you." Then he slowly closed the door behind him with a soft snick as the latch caught. She stared after him for a moment. She would get up and make herself presentable and reassure him that everything was fine. That's what a mother was supposed to do, right? That's the English way, after all. Her mother certainly would never have blubbered like that to one of her children, if she had ever had anything worth blubbering about, that was. Somehow it wasn't the same talking to the boy. He was different. When she talked to him, she often felt like she was talking to a miniature adult at times, and then his youth would peek out unexpectedly from around some mental corner. He didn't like to play with the other boys. He preferred to stay inside and read the encyclopedias, no less. She had tried to get him to make friends before moving to the new house. That was when she had had the vision of him running toward her through the fog, blood streaming down his face. She could still hear the sound of his cries if she thought about it. And soon after, had it been the next day, she had been standing in the kitchen when that sound began on the edge of hearing and grew louder, 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 her son crying. And as she looked out the window to see what had happened, She neglected to push back the gauzy window curtain, and saw him as she had in her vision, running toward her, hazy from the curtain, a bright stream of crimson down the left side of his face. She later learned that some of the older boys had painted rocks like frogs, and had been throwing them up in the air to cries of, "Look how high my frog can jump!" And of course, he had drawn close. Was it because he had wanted to make friends, to be part of the group? Or was it because that he knew that she wanted him to? In the days that followed, she wanted to ask, but dared not, for fear that stating the idea, if it had not been there before, might plant it. Another half an inch lower, and it would have blinded the boy in one eye. Later that same year, as she was helping him dress in his Sunday finest for church, he had said that another boy at school always looked shabby, like his mom didn't care, and that he had told the other boy he liked his shirt. Knowing the occasional cruelty of children, she had asked if the other boy knew he was joking. He had stared at her, shocked, before saying, "Of course not. That would hurt his feelings. Not everybody's mommy can afford to take care of them as well as you take care of me. That's not his fault." She had been taken aback then, but he had continued to say things from time to time that she struggled to find the words to describe it to herself. She glanced in the mirror as she dabbed at her eyes with another Kleenex and told herself things that made it seem like there was a second mind in there somewhere. No, she shook her head, unaware of the gesture. That wasn't quite right. It wasn't foreign. It was him, but somehow more mature. Something that would peek out on occasion, like sunlight on an otherwise cloudy day. Some awareness that would appear, and then before you could fathom the shape of it, it would be gone, as if it had never been. She had read somewhere about head injuries causing changes in personality. She couldn't remember where she read it. It was just one of those odd bits of data that stick to your mind like burdocks cling to your socks when you find yourself walking through the low brush that borders a stream's edge. And the world was so full of child-raising books and magazines these days, it was impossible to hold on to it all. These changes, this unremembered source had seemed to say, could be very subtle or quite profound, depending on the severity of the injury. But nothing in her memory of the account spoke of such intermittent changes. And besides, there had been no real trauma. The doctor had sewn the boy up easily enough, 5 stitches in his eyebrow. The stone had merely glanced off the ridge of bone above the eye. The damage had looked severe, but it was really nothing serious. He had even said he thought his new stitches looked neat. He said they made him look like Frankenstein. She paused to consider her reflection again. Odd. Just now, she couldn't remember having ever let him see Frankenstein at that age. Disney movies, to be sure, he loved all the cartoon films, but Frankenstein? Almost certainly not. Outside, the boy sat on the front step, looking up at the sky. "I wish I could fix it," he muttered to the small, lone cloud forming in the eastern sky. "I wish there was something I could do."